Hello everyone. Figured I'd do another one of these. Right. I figured, well, there are a few, I've started to list out the comments that I'm going to respond to prior to doing this. And I must start off by just reading a somewhat lengthy comment hosted on my, it wasn't on any video, it was on my channel itself. From Coinage Newton, or Coinage Newton. This man has sent me private messages, and by the way, Coinage, I have read them, but due to their nature, I cannot respond to them. There's nothing I can say because we aren't in that conversation on equal footing. You know, that's just the nature of some interactions. They're sometimes one-sided, and that's fine. But in case you're wondering why I haven't responded, that's why. Though, as always, I have read them. I read absolutely everything that gets written on my videos and sent to me and all the rest of it. But then you commented on my channel, and this is where I got kind of a little confused. I don't think I'll read all of it. Well, actually, yeah, I will. So you say, I enjoy intellectual discourse as much as the next man, and I agree with much of what is said in the debates I hear and online discussions concerning the alt-right. I also agree that the cultural conflict we are engaged in is primarily spiritual, but in the end, such a debate is irrelevant. Western civilization is founded upon Judeo-Christian morality, whether we acknowledge it or not. Ideas of right and wrong are deeply ingrained regardless of whether people are atheist humanists or not. And here's the important point. The general populace are only motivated when they are affected on a personal level, be it economically, culturally, or spiritually. Brexit was perhaps the most recent example of this. There was much talk of sovereignty, but that was a secondary issue. Sovereignty was only a mechanism for controlling immigration, which in turn was seen as the mechanism for preserving British culture. The voting patterns revealed this clearly. The great mass of the British public care little for intellectual nuance or ideology. Their own experience is their primary motivation. The echo chamber of the alt-right has little influence. The pushback against PC and cultural Marxism will come when the general populace feel themselves sufficiently oppressed. And it will be led by demagogues and gifted orators who verbalize what they want to hear. The political elite will fall in line or be swept away. Will this result in a better society? Who knows? But the common man has always been ultimately the arbiter of history, and violent conflict is his expression of will. Right, I responded to that by saying, okay, yeah, but much of this has already been said by myself and others on my channel over the past few months in particular. It's assumed, like, it's just common sense really, that we don't have lots of influence, and I've repeatedly said I don't want lots of influence. I don't want a massive YouTube channel. I don't want to be looked at by loads of people. That's just my personality. I don't understand how that's been missed. In the end, such debate is irrelevant. No, it isn't. It's absolutely meaningful and purposeful. The quality of the minds of a few that I might affect, and also myself. That's especially when you consider the nature of hierarchy. Irrelevant? No, not at all. I don't think my quality of life is irrelevant. The way I make decisions, or that of my friends, etc., etc. It's actually quite important. And I'm a little bit insulted that this has been said. Western civilization, Judeo-Christianity. Oh dear, nice try. The trouble with this comment, Coinage, is the fact that it's totally based upon the viewpoint of the masses, and I don't give a fuck about the masses. This is that's my thing. It seems I'm concerned with the small community around me. Of course, I have a loyalty to my Theed and my tribe, but I cannot affect and change the entire population of this island. I have accepted that, and therefore I will accept what influence I have. It's about quality over quantity. So, yeah, I genuinely don't care about the opinions of the masses and the people. It means absolutely nothing. In fact, it means less. The more people think a thing, generally speaking, the less that thing, the less the opinion's worth, to be very honest with you. But anyway, I responded to you by saying, yeah, so, basically. That's what I implied anyway. And then you said, why would you find it odd to receive a messaging clear on a topic you have consistently failed to state in simple terms? Perhaps it was not nuanced or esoteric enough. Oh, good grief. Any argument obscured by verbiage and rabbit trails becomes no argument at all. I mean what I say is not the same as I say what I mean. No offence intended. Index. Right, so what you say there is you haven't said what I've said in the way I've said it. And then you just kind of have a little jab at me. I'm sorry, but why should I care about what you have to say? What authority do you have? What is your station? What is your position? I know from your private messages that indeed I should listen to you. However, this... fuck's sake. Look, we have done hours and hours and hours and hours of discussion, debate on every topic under the sun. Especially this year, we've been very active. Myself and my community and my circle of friends who are on the Plebeian podcast and the Hangouts and so on. I understand that you're not going to be able to go through all of that quickly and remember absolutely everything that's said. Just that's the nature of these sorts of things. But consistently failed to state? No. Everything you first implied has been addressed before. Perhaps not in the past 2 weeks, some of it, but generally speaking, yeah, pretty much everything you said we've done, we mentioned. And we repeat ourselves quite a lot. Due to the nature of these discussions, you know, 1 week you might have a certain group of people, the next week someone else might show up. So you do repeat yourself. That's fine, and people ask me the same questions every other week. You know, that's fine, I don't mind doing that. So, but yeah, and then you just have a little jab at me. I'm sorry, but that's nonsense. I do use flowery language a lot, like I've openly admitted many times, and all the rest of it. But I think it's totally ridiculous to insinuate that I've never made a coherent or clear point. I have done, and I will do, and for good grief. There has never been a point that I've made where my language has been so obtuse and silly that I've ever had anyone asking me, Adam, what did you say at this point? I have no idea what you meant. That's never happened, and it never will do, because I do listen to myself speak. I hear my voice come out before it comes out. Like Bowden, actually, funnily enough. I'm a mediumistic speaker. It was interesting when I did the talk at the Extremist Club. That's exactly what happened. But yeah, I hear every word that comes out of my mouth. I know if it makes sense or not. So, honestly, this just came off to me as awkward and just unsavory. Anyway, on to other comments. Athena, welcome back Athena. She said, what are your thoughts, or asked, what are your thoughts on Evola and magic, Julius Evola and magic? Thoughts, that's a very ambiguous sort of way to put it. Thoughts on Evola and magic? Well, in what context? Evola was involved in magic. He was involved with the group, for example. And they published or authored this group, which was full of anonymous individuals, for the most part. They offered the introduction to magic. And obviously Evola wrote on the topic many, 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 many times. But magic. Dear, what are we talking about when we say the word magic? When I think of magic, I think of alchemy and kind of transmutative activities. So, and that does become a broad umbrella. Things like jihad come under it as much as alchemy, as much as conjuration, and so on and so forth. And no, we're not doing Dungeons and Dragons. There was a very good chapter in... where was it? Yeah, it was in Renegados: Crisis of the Modern World. Yeah, Chapter 4, Sacred and Profane Science, where he mentions alchemy as well. And he talks about how these things have changed over the ages, from being mystical and basically initiatory arts to being perceived as kind of materialistic endeavors. So alchemy isn't about turning lead into gold, it's about the transmutation and control over one's emotional and psychological dimensions. So, yeah. As for Evola's relation to such things, there's a lot, because under the umbrella of magic you could throw a lot of things. You could throw Hermeticism, alchemy, Tantra, yoga, a hell of a lot of kind of esoteric or occult practices you could fall under that banner, put under that banner. So, and that was the bulk of Evola's life's work. Offering initiatory paths for people to follow, which do have magical elements and magical properties to them. So yeah, unfortunately that comment's just a bit too vague. So sorry, Athena, I can't do too much precise with it. Now the next two questions are points are kind of the same. I'll read them both one after the other, then I'll respond. Heinrich Himmler: and I watched some of your public talk. My advice: smile less and shout more. Other than that, you're on your way to Evolian Bowdendom. Oh, good grief. I know it's becoming a meme, but I don't like it. I don't want to be compared with Bowden because Bowden is far above me, so it's just stupid and distasteful to try and as well with Evola. The idea that people are trying to compare me with these people, even jokingly, I find very uncomfortable. Anyway, Jason Hanwell says, you always sound so timid and afraid of everything you talk about. Be full of fight rather than full of fear. Yeah, so these comments are pretty much the same thing. What it basically boils down to is I would far rather be cautious and patient with things than overconfident, overzealous and cocky. I'm, as a person, extremely sensitive. Not really, I mean, I am emotionally sensitive, but to myself and to people, I'm very, very, very over-analytical, and I overthink everything. So me being cautious is my way of navigating through life. That's just how I am as a person. And I consciously try and remain so, instead of getting ahead of myself, because I don't want to make mistakes and trip up. Obviously this does manifest as a lack of confidence. There are many things you could draw this back to with me personally. Things which I don't need to mention. So, I suppose in time, as I settle into things, I will become more confident and self-sure. But as of the moment, it's too early. Also, regarding that talk in particular, that was the first public speaking engagement I've ever done. And it was without notes, without a script. It was also my first time. That's the furthest I've been away from my home by myself ever. And that was the first time also for a couple of years that I've really been outside of my comfort zone, in another city, the other side of the country, just with my cousin, in that sort of social environment. I'm not a social person. I'm very introverted. So I think all things considered, I did alright. But yeah, it depends though about shouting, because you don't. If you shout, you have to have there has to be a verbal crescendo, otherwise you just look like a retard. So, with my talk at the London Forum in September, I'm already kind of thinking about the topic, and I will probably write some notes for it. Therefore, I will be able to be a bit more boisterous because I will have something in front of me which tells me what to do, more or less. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes. But, yeah, it would be unwise for me to be very, very full of confidence and sure of myself at this stage. And the thing I was mentioning or implying, saying that was self-evident, is the fatherlessness thing. One is without a guide. One has to be one's own guide. Trial and error, oneself without anything before you. It's that's what you want. That's a natural thing to do. It's funny, people in my sort of position, they'd go one of two ways. They do what I do and be cautious and timid and patient, or they go the absolute fucking opposite. Women particularly tend to go the other way, and become chaotic and sporadic and all over the place. And yeah, so I'm happier like this than the opposite. Anyway, next comment. Marcus Antonius says, I quite like Sayyid Hossein Nazir. I greatly enjoyed Man and Nature, which is one of his books. However, like many other mainstream traditionalists, he appears to adopt a quasi-modern outlook on race and multiculturalism. They also seem to extend their perennialism to the masses, which do not and frankly cannot comprehend it. Incidentally, these mainstream traditionalists also tend to neglect Julius Evolar's work. And then the second part of your comment I'll read in a minute. So yeah, everything you said is pretty much bang on. And I think it's a great danger. You had a similar thing with Manly P. Hall regarding offering things to the masses which shouldn't be offered to them. I think there has to be some kind of outreach. I mean, everything I do is public, right? Even though it'll only appeal to and be seen by a small number of people, it is public. It's there, right? The act in and of itself is a public exhibition. The number of people who will jump on board and not get it is very, very, very few. There have been a couple who have commented on my videos and tried to contact me who just don't understand. People who are very much stuck in that anti-politically correctness kind of stage, if you will. Yeah, that's fine though. We all have our own journeys and our own destinations. So, I think the problem though, especially with this idea of these guys extending perennialism to the masses, is when they seem to, and I don't even know if it's intentional, I don't think it is, mix it in with modern kind of capital T tolerant views. And that's tolerance as an ideology. So that lends itself obviously to multiculturalism and modernity and modernism. A modern attitude, a modern leveling, centralizing, grey attitude. And that was particularly exposed with Sayyid Nazir and the video I responded to about the West bloody coexisting with Muslims. I think that's ridiculous. The West is in such a state, it has to sort itself out. That traditionalism channel, I'm so disappointed that he's hidden my comments and pretty much everyone else's who dared gainsay him. There was a video uploaded, I think, today by that channel, titled something like, Can Islam Coexist with Modernity? That is a very telling title and subject or idea. No, it should not. Nothing should have to coexist with modernity. Modernity shouldn't exist. You know, and we're talking about here capital M modernity, so egalitarianism, capitalism, mercantilism, the bourgeois mentality, so on and so forth. Modernity is the antithesis to tradition and perennialism. And suddenly this guy's saying, oh no, they should coexist. It, to me, just speaks of a kind of confusion. And I don't think this traditionalist fellow and those like him are evil or horrible or ill-intended or malicious. I just think they haven't gone the whole hog, if you know what I mean. They haven't gone all the way. With some aspects, they are very knowledgeable. Like Nazir and metaphysics, he knows his stuff. But applying that to the domain of action and to an actual political or cultural landscape, it's just impossible. When, in fact, in history, yes, these things did have a political and cultural and active form. Metaphysics was translated into the society at large. It wasn't just kept to a religious clique. It has that dimension to it, of course. That's what esotericism is. But these things were also found manifest in the exoteric culture. These sorts of traditionalists, quote-unquote traditionalists, seem to think it's all just about esotericism and reading this book on mysticism or that one, and, you know, going to conferences and talking about the firmament and, you know, initiation and history, instead of, you know, actually being an entire worldview and a type of being, which is manifest in the individual as well as the collective. So yeah, to me, it's kind of, at least from my perspective, maybe I'm wrong, but from my eyes, it just looks like these people, they get some of it, but they don't want to go all the way, because they still have that kind of modern attitude in some respects. And that's unfortunate. But your second part, last sentence, is you say ideally, wouldn't it be the Kshatriya who deal with the day-to-day management of this kind? And that's responding to a point in the video where I talk about the commoners and leadership from Brahmins. Well, no, Brahmins, it's different societies, different ancient societies were more Kshatriya-led or more Brahmin-led. In the East, there was more focused on the domain of contemplation. In the West, in our ancient history, there was more a focus on the domain of action. At least in antiquity, if we wish to be honest. But no, a Brahmin has very much authority over people, especially in the sense of the community. What is the center of a traditional community? It's obviously the church, or the temple, or religious institution. The culture and religion are intertwined, they're the same thing. One's identity is a religious identity. One is of a religious or spiritual continuum. This is what traditional man is a part of. He's a part of metaphysical reality. That's what's exposed to him, and that's what he plays his part of, and that's what governs him, as opposed to secular, materialistic values, which have no relation to a higher order. So, Brahmin, the priests, do have immense authority in traditional societies. I mean, look at the Emperor of Rome, Pontifex Maximus. What does that mean? It means builder of spiritual bridges. He is the link between the gods and men. You have this spiritual element again and again in these sorts of traditions. And the Kshatriya, the true Kshatriya, is a part of that, but at least according to people like Genon and other kind of more mystic type people, or sages, the Kshatriya is actually subordinate to the Brahmin. Someone like Evola would take a slightly different view. They wouldn't totally disagree, but they would take a different view in certain cases. But that's part of the debate and all these things, part of the fun. Yeah. No Name Yet says, "Oh, you are so deeply wrong about this. This is about, I think this is on my Islam and Europeans video. The current crop of Europeans is so uprooted, so soulless, so destroyed, so lost. They have never been so ripe for the most pitiless spiritual tyranny. Just look at the odd ways in which today's left overlaps with Islam. Expect many white conversions to Islam in the coming decades." No, I am very skeptical about these sorts of things. You will have some conversions in there. There are, right? These things happen. That's only because Westerners, Europeans, are just trying to find something of depth. This is what I said the other night on the live stream about converts and why I'm suspicious of them. Because it's like, They have no idea who the hell they are, where they come from, what are their roots, what forms them as a particular being, of which continuum are they a part of. And so you have this kind of jumping ship of the European identity, as faded and as rugged as it is, jumping ship to try and jump upon this other thing and assimilate it and take upon yourself that foreign mantle. The correct course of action is to repair your own flag, not get a new one. It's to mend the tears in it, sew them shut, get some fresh dye for it, and rejuvenate it. Maybe add a little bit to it. Maybe improve it, make it bigger. And I think this will happen eventually. I don't think it's in the nature of Europeans to simply be destroyed forever. I think you look at our history, it says all you need to know. We can look at about, at least 5,000, 6,000 years of European history quite well. We have a good feel for pretty much that entire time frame. That's 6,000 years compared to what? I mean, modernity aside, which is now, we've been really in modernity for a couple centuries. And we won't go further back because that just opens a can of worms. But let's be honest, the past 70 years have been particularly poisonous. Have been particularly dead. 70 years. So that's about 1% of that total time frame. 1% of that total time frame has been quite concerning. Obviously, we can make all these observations about the last 200, 300 years, but the last 70 years have been particularly, especially from a demographic and political point of view, very concerning. But they don't actually reflect what Europeans are. They don't. These past few decades of nihilism, they are not actually representative of what Europe is, of what Europeans are, of what particular groups within Europeans are, what we're actually a part of, and what we are continuing. I think you will see a resurrection of the church. It might come from East Europe. Perhaps the papacy in Rome will wake up a little bit. It's just a matter of time. And anyway, the actions of individuals doesn't really change at all. What you and I should be doing stays the same, regardless of what happens out in the world. We should be true to ourselves, and we should know ourselves, and we should know God. That's kind of it. So, yeah. That's all I really have to say about that. There's not much point in even adopting a pessimistic attitude. And don't say pessimism is realistic. It isn't. It isn't. Again, if you look at the past 6,000 years, if you want to have a picture of reality, the picture is pretty damn good. We're just in a tough spot right now, but that's fine. You know. Let me just find a little remark I made on it at the end of an article the other week. Just comes to mind again. Yeah, on the last part of Primer, I say, though a candle burning in broad day might appear dim, in the darkest night it can illuminate the world. And that's the attitude we should take. If the world is full of degeneracy and trash, then if we aren't like that, then it makes, well, there's even more glory to be won. It's harder for us to be virtuous than it ever has been for man to be virtuous. Such are the systems in society and the structures which would previously facilitate virtue and truth-seeking. Such is their dilapidation in the modern world, that those of us who still can do it, it's just it's a test of our own strength. Our attitude should be that of the Roman legionary who died at Pompeii, who didn't leave his post as Vesuvius was erupting because he wasn't relieved. And he died upright, standing. I think I'm paraphrasing or referencing Spengler there. But the point is that our actions are the same, whether it's going to be a good outcome or a bad outcome. I think it will be a good outcome, but it doesn't change one's own actions. One is consistent in spite of it. Alright, we've been going on for quite some time. This is going to be the last comment I respond to. Anthony G. Here's why Islam is so dangerous. How potentially dangerous all ideologies and belief are should never be determined by what their moderate adherents and supporters are doing. They should all be judged on how likely and easily those ideologies and beliefs can be subverted. Right. I'm only going to read that, obviously in the description. I'll paste the entire comment. But, yeah, this is a troublesome sort of approach. Islam should not be judged whether on its perceived approach to non-believers, whether it's violent or not. These things are really of no importance. Islam should be judged on the fact that it is simply not us. There is simply no continuum between Europe and Islam. In the East, you might see it kind of feathering in a little bit, in Chechnya and parts of that part of the world. Sure, but in the Greco-Roman, in the Christian, in the Germanic world, there is absolutely no continuum between us and Islam. And that's the only point of contention which is needed. I was not born a Muslim. I will never be a Muslim. I can never be a Muslim. I was born a abandoned English man, abandoned and broken, just like England herself. I am of a particular household, so to speak. Now, this house is dilapidated, but what am I going to do? Am I going to try and find a new house? No. This is the house of my ancestors, and I'm going to do my best to repair it, to fill the cracks, to straighten the chimney, to mend the broken and crooked doors, and to make it livable. Because this is mine, and I cannot have another house. Nothing else would be appropriate. And that really is the extent to which we should even consider something like Islam. You could say equally, you know, oh, here's why Sikhism is so dangerous, here's why Hinduism is so dangerous. It's nonsense. Could I become a Sikh? No. Could I become a Hindu? No. Could I become a practitioner of some obscure South American polytheism? No. It's a totally different way of being, and it doesn't correspond to myself. In the modern world, there is a layer of ice between us and truth, and all we have to do is puncture through it. That's not a very good analogy. Dirt, uncleanliness. It's like you have a nice sword. You have to clean and polish the blade, not get a new one. That's all we have to do. Modernity is the dirt and filth that you clean off of the sword. And we can do that through self-knowledge, through the path of truth and virtue. It's quite simple when you get down to it. So, there you go. Anyway, we've gone on for long enough. Thank you for listening to this particularly long installment of this little responding to comments series, I suppose. And have a good evening.